Welcome back to the Good Enough Mompreneur Podcast. Today, we're diving deep into a conversation that speaks directly to the heart of every mompreneur: how we balance work, home, and the overwhelming demands society places on our time and our energy. Our guest is Carrie M. author of More Than Pretty Boxes: How the Rise of Professional Organizing Shows Us the Way We Work Isn't Working. And this absolutely fascinating book takes us behind the scenes of the professional organizing industry, a field dominated by women that surprisingly didn't even have a name until the 1980s. Through interviews with organizing pioneers and firsthand experience working alongside professionals, Carrie reveals how our struggles with clutter and organization are deeply tied to the way we work. Mind-blowing, but it is. And not only that, but it's tied to how we live and, let's be real, how much we're expected to manage. Today, we're going to explore the radical potential of organizing, not just as a way to tidy up, but as a lens through which we can push back against the overwhelming pressures of modern life. Carrie helps us unpack the emotional and gendered nature of paid and unpaid work, overconsumption, and why so many women turn to organizing, whether professionally or personally, as a way to reclaim control. So if you've ever felt like you're drowning in stuff, and I think everybody listening to this podcast one time or another has felt that way, whether it's physical clutter, responsibility, or unrealistic expectations, this conversation is for you. So welcome, Carrie. I know that was a lot, but I thought that this book deserved a proper introduction.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
I am too. I think I was really excited to have you as a guest, and the topic of this book, of course, was, I thought, would resonate with this audience, but I was really surprised with how meaningful it was and how it resonated and helped me learn to give myself more grace when it came to expectations and stuff. So thank you for writing it.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you enjoyed it, and anything in the world that helps moms, women, business owners feel a little more grace for themselves, I think is a win.
I mean, that's what this whole podcast is about. And so I just find it really fascinating. So let's dive in and talk about how so many professional organizers are women, and they turn to this work for necessity, whether it's economic insecurity, which you talk about, how so many women shoulder that more than men, limited job opportunities, or just the need to be more flexible in their career, which honestly, I think many mompreneurs listening could check all of those boxes. So what does this say about the way that we view work today? And why do you think so many women, especially moms and women of color, are drawn to the profession of organizing?
It's a great question, and the answer sort of surprised me while I was doing my research. So I had the good fortune to interview a number of the very first organizers in our country, right? So some of the women who started in the 1970s, early 80s, and built this profession from the ground up. And it wasn't so surprising to hear them say that one of the reasons they pursued organizing was because there just weren't that many good jobs open to women. I heard again and again that as these women who are now in their 80s and 90s, as they were growing up, you could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, you could be a secretary, you could be a waitress, you could be a stay-at-home mom. That was those were the options they felt were available to them. And so they ended up inventing this new field to try to have an alternative to those options when those options didn't really fit them or the lives they were living, especially when they had children in the home. And so that, I think, is not a shocking story to hear about the 70s and 80s. But what was so fascinating is that the exact same reasons that those women were drawn to create the organizing profession in the first place, even though we're at a time when so many more professions are available and open to women, and so many women have had great success in so many fields. The things that are pulling women now into organizing are the same things that were pulling them back then. It's that the employment offered to them, as broad as it might be now,
Mhm.
it still rarely offers the flexibility,
Mhm.
the autonomy, and the meaning, right? The sort of sense
Mhm.
of doing work that is meaningful and helps people, they're
Mhm.
still looking for that. So even with all those jobs out there, there's something about the way standard employment works
Mhm.
that makes organizing and jobs like it
Mhm.
attractive, especially to women.
Yeah. That is just so fascinating. But what I think is really important to talk about too is I know so many of my listeners and moms, myself included, also haven't valued things like organizing and what difference that can mean to people. So I think as women and moms, we're still learning how to value things that might be innate to us or haven't been valued by society. So I think that that is another message that kind of goes along with everything else you uncovered. And that kind of leads into my next question in that, we've long been expected to manage the home and everything in it and about it and around it to keep things running smoothly and to take care of all the stuff. And when we're also running businesses, how does this expectation shape the organizing industry? And I really love some of the anecdotes and stories that you shared from those that you kind of shadowed. And we just really we're beating ourselves up and don't realize how much we're shouldering more than any other generation.
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many examples in the book. I think one of the things that surprised me, in so many ways, real life organizing is nothing like what you see on the TV shows, right? There really are. It's not like that. And
Mhm.
yet, there were certain moments when I was doing field work and I was working as an unpaid assistant to organizers. And there were those kind of TV moments, right? Where after the organizing session was done, or at some really critical point in the middle of it, you just saw the organizer trying to convince the client there's nothing wrong with you. Yes,
Mhm.
your house is cluttered. You're not opening the mail when you need to open the mail, right? That things
Mhm.
are you're missing things. But it's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you're a failure as a mom or a business person or anything else, right?
Mhm.
It's because what's being asked of you is unprecedentedly much, right? The burdens of contemporary life. And I think it's not just women who are being unfairly burdened by that, but I think it's women even more so than most other groups, right? Because we have all of this sort of perfect storm of responsibilities that have
Yeah.
combined. You have so many families who either only have one income or they have two working parents in order to get by. And so
Mhm.
everybody's doing paid employment. There's no single person whose full job is to manage the home. And even when
Mhm.
there is, the work that goes into managing a home and raising a family and existing as a human in the modern world, it's bigger than it used to be. And one of the examples that I love to give is that when I enrolled my child in kindergarten for the first time,
Mm.
I asked my mom what she did when she enrolled me in kindergarten it would have been like 1979, 1980-ish, right? And
Mhm.
she said, I'm not sure that I remember exactly. She said, I think I had to show my driver's license and that little yellow book that had whether you had your immunizations written
Right.
into it. And when I enrolled my child in kindergarten, I had to download 4 different apps. I had to visit a half dozen websites. I had to go to the district office twice. I had to go see 2 different doctors to get 6 different notes for him to be able to get sunscreen at school, for his EpiPen and his Benadryl for his peanut allergy. And I counted before his first day of kindergarten, I had received, I think it was 48 emails from his school, right? So again, it's not that I'm saying like, oh, parenting is harder today. It was hard then, it's hard now. It
Yeah.
was glorious then, it's glorious now, right?
Right.
But the stuff of it, the tasks and
Mhm.
responsibilities, they have just exponentially grown. And I think that if we're not recognizing that, then we're failing to see that if we're struggling, it's for legitimate reasons. It's because we're
Yeah.
being asked to do too much, not because there's something inherently wrong with us as individuals or a generation.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, parents is very isolating unless you're like, I mean, that's brilliant. My mom is no longer around to be able to say, "Hey, what was kindergarten? What was high school?" So just sharing that is just really powerful to be able to help somebody go, "Oh, okay, maybe I just need to be at least 1% less hard on myself about all that I'm managing."
Mhm.
But what something you said made me want to go back to why women are just thriving in this career because of that ability to connect with their clients and to say things to them like, this is a lot. Like anybody, I've worked with so many clients. So can you just talk about it goes back to that whole idea of us not giving ourselves credit for those things that we innately are good at. And some of those things like being able to connect with our clients and help them ease their emotions like we would do with our family members. Like some
Mhm.
of those things that we certainly don't value that make women particularly good at this job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether it's biology or society, right? We know that women are the ones who tend to do most of the emotional connection. They tend to manage the emotions of the people around them, whether at
Mhm.
home or at work, manage our own emotions so that our kid doesn't know, I'm about to lose my mind if you don't brush your teeth for the fifth time I've asked you in a row, right? We're doing all of that kind of managing. Should we be? Probably not as much as we are, but like, in some ways that's just how it is. Again, why is sort of this bigger question of nature and nurture. But I think often the things that women, and I'm generalizing here, of course,
Right.
but the things that women are expected to do and expected to do well are also generally deeply undervalued in our
Hmm.
economy,
Yeah.
right? Most early economic thinkers didn't even count the work of raising humans and running households. They didn't even count
Mhm.
it as labor, right? It's not part of our GDP, like it's not calculated in. So on the one hand, it's not a surprise that when women are really good at something, let's say people are
Mhm.
naturally good at organizing. I am not naturally organized. My mother will attest to that. I did not grow up that way, but I have become more organized
Mhm.
over my life because I had to be, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think people who have these skills naturally don't recognize, first of all, that other people don't have these because
Mm.
nobody's really stopping us and saying, hey, wow, little girl, you are really good at keeping that binder organized, or you are really great at, you're staying in at recess and helping the teacher organize the craft closet. Like
Mhm.
that is really valuable work that you're
Right.
doing. I think we just say, oh, that's nice. Oh, you're being nice. You're being well behaved. But
Mm.
there's actual like executive functioning skills behind
Mhm.
all of that that we're not really valuing. And I
Yeah.
think that's why it's not a surprise. And I suspect this is true for a lot of mompreneurs, but I can only speak to organizers. I went to so many functions for new organizers at conferences and meetings, and so many women were they were saying, I want to start this organizing business, but they were waiting for someone to give them permission to
Yes.
ask for money for the things they were doing. And
Yes.
so some of these experienced organizers would say, nobody's going to value your work unless you value your work. So if you
Yeah.
keep doing it for free for friends and families and your kid's teacher, you're never going to turn it into a business. You have to just start the business today, launch the website, send the email, reach your contacts, whatever it is. Do it today because that's the only way your work is ever going to be valued, right?
Yeah.
So there's sort of that going on. And then I think it's also true at the early days of organizing and now organizing and other occupations that many women tend to be drawn to are kind of at a disadvantage in
Mhm.
terms of being taken seriously and being paid well. Because historically, if women perform the work, it is undervalued and it is low paid or unpaid. If it's
Mhm.
work performed in the home, which a lot of organizing is, it is undervalued and it is low paid. And as if it is work that involves some form of service to others, it
Mhm.
is undervalued and it is low paid.
Yeah.
And so trying to get these kinds of jobs taken seriously and compensated fairly,
Mhm.
that's a real struggle. I mean, I tell in the book the story of one of these organizers who went to her local small business association and said, okay, I have this small business and I need you to help me put together a plan for it. And this was in the 1980s. And she said the men just laughed at her. It was all men. And they just said, honey, that's not a business. Right. Now, she, of course, went on to build a business that is still thriving and mentored some of the leaders in the field today. So
Right.
she really enjoyed when decades later, one of the organizers she had mentored, who is now a leader in the field, received the Small Business Award Business Person of the Year from
Mhm.
that particular association, the same one who told her, like, this is not a job and you don't belong here. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, I mean, it's such a head scratcher, but it's no wonder why we're still struggling. You don't just one day turn on the lights and go, oh, okay, yeah, I value what I do. I mean, it is a process. And what you just said is, a piece of that. And, for anybody listening who is struggling with that permission to start the business or charge more for what you do, there is a reason why, and you should actually look at how you value and other people value what you do. And I just think that that's so important because so many moms that I talk to just feel like, and even myself thought, if I didn't have this masculine kind of way about me, and there was this masculine kind of idea of leadership. But as moms, we have all of these transferable skills that we bring to entrepreneurship that actually pre-qualify us more and more. These being able to connect with other people and empathize with where they are and how they're feeling and connect with the customer. There is beginning to be an understanding that women who lead businesses perform better because of that. And so I just, had to be on the soapbox about that for a minute.
No,
So,
absolutely. And if you don't mind me jumping in there, you're really
yeah.
reminding me of part of the book when I talk about how one of the struggles is early organizers they were buying into kind of this male model of professionalism that we're
Mhm.
supposed to pretend
Yep.
we don't have families, we don't have home lives, we don't have personalities. We're supposed to just be like these sort of stereotypical business people, which was really businessmen, right?
Right.
So women were kind of trying to craft themselves as professionals under a model that really wasn't built for them.
Right.
Right. And so I love those moments when I would hear some organizers push back about that. One
Mhm.
organizer who herself has many children and specializes in organizing homes with a lot of kids. I can't remember now. I think it'll have the right number in the book. I think she had either 7 or 8 kids. I know that she now has dozens of grandchildren. And so there were often organizers who would say, oh, well, you can't have your kid answer your phone. And this is back when people were using home phones for their
Yeah.
businesses. And she said, yes, I can. She said, the kind of clients that want to work with me will like it that my kid is answering the phone
Yeah.
or in the background while I'm on
Hmm.
the phone because they know I am like them. I am in the same space they're in, and it will make them trust me to come into their space and not judge them and be able to offer them solutions that fit their family. So I
Hmm.
like that she was sort of saying, I know how you're defining professional, but I know my business and I know my clients, and I'm not going to pretend to be something other than what I am to match your model of what professionalism looks like. And so I think those moments to me, I learned so much in thinking about, wow, how many of the ideas about what it means to run a successful business are outdated, are built in a world of work that doesn't exist anymore, that
Hmm.
don't account for the way most people work today and the way our families are put together. I mean, it was really like a light bulb moment for me
Yeah.
to see how much that system was kind of built against women trying to start their own businesses and build them.
Right. Yeah, I'm so glad you made that point. And it wasn't until the pandemic that I even realized how long I had been apologizing for being a mother my professional career until men started showing up with the cat and the dog and the kid running
Mhm.
behind them and whatnot. It was like, oh, okay, so I can actually.
I once, when my son was very young, so I'm a professor. My day job is I'm
Mhm.
a professor, and I was in a class, and I just mentioned my kid now and then because right, I had a little baby, and he's a freaking delight, and of course I'm going to talk to him about him, right? Um, And I know that there are some people who would not share that kind of thing in the classroom, right? But if I'm, just chatting with students before or after class, I would mention it. And I was a little ambivalent about that, right? Like, was that professional of me? Was I not maintaining enough of a boundary with my students?
Mhm.
And late in the semester, like 10 weeks into a 15-week semester, a student dropped by office hours to ask about a paper. And as she was leaving, she said, I just wanted to tell you how grateful I am that you mentioned your kid in class, because I had a kid at 15, and I'm sometimes embarrassed to state that because I feel like other college students are going to judge me because I'm already the mom of a school-aged kid and I'm here doing this work. And I really just appreciated that you're in that room showing that, like, I'm a professional and I'm also a parent.
Mhm.
And even just saying that right now, I just got chills,
I-
right? Because just in that moment, that was not my plan. It was not a strategy to make young parents and moms feel included, or to show the women in my classrooms that they can do both of these things too and be these things too. But it turned out that way. And so I think I started to recognize that my inability to draw that rigid boundary between my role as a mom and my role as a professor was actually a strength. It was not a weakness. And it was a strength that, like, men, women, non-binary, whoever you are, anybody in my classroom, in the classroom of life for all of us as well, can look at that and maybe grant themselves a little grace or imagine their future a little more broadly when they see, hey, look, we're all doing this too, when the cat or the dog or the baby comes in on Zoom during the things, right? Like, this is life. This
Absolutely.
is what life looks like.
I've had guests tell me stories of pitching to venture capitalists if while breastfeeding.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is a totally different dynamic now. And I think one of the silver linings of COVID, it was that. It was just like, look, we're all just trying to survive here and do our thing. And do you want in or not?
right.
You know? So no, I such an important part of the conversation and what you uncovered in the book. But I think there's even more that we can learn about entrepreneurship from your book. And when you talked about some of the struggles that, you know, organizers of color or of an older age or in the LGBTQ plus community, some of those obstacles that they also faced even when starting their own businesses. And I think it's so important as the stewards of our own businesses, like, not to recreate those dysfunctional systems that work. So, what as entrepreneurs can we learn from what you uncovered to not repeat those same systems?
Right. I mean, I think that's such an important question. And one of the things that I noticed is that when I went to meetings for professional organizers and their conferences, there was a lot of conversation around, you need to treat your business like a business. You need to take your business
Right.
seriously. You need to put in the hours. And of course, sure, those things are all important. But there was sort of an omission around the fact that the two different people can put in the same amount of work and
Mhm.
take their business the same amount of seriously and do exactly identical things, and they're not going to have the same level of success. And a lot of that has to do with their social position, right? So one
Mhm.
of the organizers that I met with in Manhattan charges $450 an hour on weekends. It's actually funny because she was the mother of young twins, and she started charging $450 an hour on the weekend so people wouldn't hire her on the weekend because she wanted to be with her family. And instead, of course, the wealthiest Manhattanites were like, well, if she's charging $450, she must be the best. And so she got
Right.
more bookings on the weekend than she did when she had lower rates. Anyway, but one of the things that she said was, look, I live in Manhattan, and the school my kids go to and the social circles that I'm in with my spouse, these are wealthy people. And so when she did this for a few friends for free and they recommended her to other friends, she was being recommended to some of the wealthiest people in one of the wealthiest cities in the world,
Right.
right? So she was able to make a really good income for herself, even working part-time. But if you don't have that kind of network, if the
Mhm.
people you know don't have extra spending money, if they don't have, if you don't have sort of a natural um, soapbox to declare yourself from, right? If your
Mhm.
friends have less money, if they have less, all of it, then you're going to be at a disadvantage. So part of it is about the networks you have. Part
Yeah.
of it is about generational wealth and how much money you have. And if you have a partner who also has an income or a family who can kind of help you coast through those early unprofitable times,
Mhm.
those are real privileges that not all people have equal access to. So
Mhm.
I think that's an important thing to remember. And then
Mhm.
on top of that, you've got issues of representation, where one organizer of color mentioned that every January, long before she was an organizer, she loved getting those like the decluttering January edition of women's
Right.
magazines. And
Mhm.
every single time it was a white organizer on the cover. And
Mhm.
every single time she flipped through, almost every single article about organizers were quoting and citing and featuring white organizers. And she just felt like, I don't see myself in these pages. Right.
Mhm.
And so I can imagine other young men and women of color not seeing themselves represented and thinking that's not a career for me. And
Mhm.
then the last piece is you also have just discrimination, right? And
Right.
sometimes it is the sort of subtle stuff that we're all guilty of that we aren't really aware of when we look at two websites for organizers, and without even intending to, we select the one who looks most like us, who reminds us most of ourselves, right?
Mhm.
And so that puts organizers from minority communities at a disadvantage. And
Mhm.
then there are organizers who have encountered just direct racism in the field, where
Right.
they showed up at a door and the person didn't realize they were a person of color and either didn't want to work with them or clearly had some discomfort around that issue, sort of
Mhm.
saying, "Oh, I didn't know you were, nobody told me you were." And, and that happens too. So I think as entrepreneurs or as managers, employers, clients, whatever it is, I think it's worth first checking our own biases. Where might we be making decisions from places that aren't logical, that we should maybe be interrogating a little more? And also recognizing that everybody starting in the same place is not a fair playing field, because nobody's ever starting in the same place.
Mhm.
So if you're saying hard work is all it takes, and we know certain people can work as hard as they want and still not succeed, then
Mhm.
what do you do about that? What are you going to do to make sure that the people who have the least chance of succeeding get the same opportunities as the people
Mhm.
who come in with the most advantages
Mhm.
at their back?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's so important. And as somebody who works with, different women starting and growing businesses, just thinking outside of the box of like, where are other funding opportunities and things like that, and other loans other than traditional ones that I might have looked at as somebody who's not a person of color. And so just thinking differently about how we solve problems and the people on our team and the policies we have, I think is so important to go into as we run our businesses and we help other people solve problems. So I love that reminder. And I found it so interesting too, the the organizers of color particularly that were running into obstacles in the communities that they were trying to serve, in that different um, communities have different perspectives on shame around the things that they have and the things that they manage. So I think too, also having that different, trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes when you're trying to solve a problem as a business owner and not just looking at it from one lens is really an important lesson from your book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. Early organizers say that they used to, one organizer talked about how she went to a job and the woman called her real quick on her little flip phone and said, "Don't come yet. My husband hasn't left yet." Because the woman was so ashamed that she needed help being organized that she didn't want her husband to know she brought someone in.
Yeah,
And organizers will say that has changed so much. The stigma has really
yeah,
shrunk. We're so much more used to hiring people to help us with all different kinds of parts of our lives, whether it's dog walkers or party planners or, or
yeah,
organizers, therapists, all the stuff.
right,
Um, but even so, you're right. There are certain communities in which there really is still a stronger stigma against asking for help in these
right.
areas. And some of the organizers of color that I interviewed talk specifically about, one Mexican American organizer who really wants to bring those services to that community, but has trouble using word of mouth to publicize her business because most of her clients feel that
Mhm.
within their community, they would be judged for having to hire someone to help with their household.
Yeah. I mean, there has been progress, but there is still this pervasive sense that we're supposed to do it all and we're just not enough, and we sit in silence. And that's the whole reason around this podcast. But I just think it's so fascinating about this book that you've been working for years on. And it has somehow just like illuminated all of that. So I find that so fascinating. So, we often feel like we're just drowning in all of the things, the stuff, the responsibilities, the expectations. And so, what are some of the ways that we can start pushing back on that and letting go of not feeling like we're not enough, and feeling like it's okay to give ourselves permission to not be perfect, not have the perfect home, not do all of the things all of the time. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I'm still learning, right? We're all still a
Right?
work in
Oh,
progress.
absolutely.
I will say with age has come more grace for myself. I'm more willing to acknowledge, oh, I'm 50 years old and I don't know that thing, and I'm pretty okay never knowing that thing, right? That's a whole field of knowledge I don't have, and I think I'm okay with that, right?
Right.
Um, but I think the key is just as you're saying, it's to be gentle with ourselves and to be guided not by our sense of what we should be doing or what we think other people will judge us if we don't do, but to be guided by our own preferences and our own values. And so I always tell this story. I have a colleague, Portia Jackson Preston. She's amazing. She does research on women and self-care. And one day we were doing a writing day together. And I was trying to decide if I was going to teach a summer class that summer. And I had taught every winter session and every summer session for about a decade. And I was just tired. I was tired and I didn't want to do it, but it was a nice chance to make extra money. And so I was sort of thinking out loud, and Portia said, well, I mean, I guess it's just a matter of your priorities. Okay, so if you do teach that summer session, you can make extra money for your family, right? And if you don't, you can spend more time with your child over the summer when he's on vacation. And once she laid it out like that, I was like, well, obviously, I'm not doing it because I needed the time, like most of us. I mean, I'm in a fortunate position. I need time more than I need the extra amount of money that would have generated. Some people do not have the luxury of that. And I recognize that is a privilege.
Yeah.
But as soon as she said, well, which do you value more? I thought, I mean, my kid is young. He's not going to want to hang out with me forever. I got to do this while I can. I've got to take these times while I can. And it made the decision so clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that often we need to be better at saying no. That I try, if I'm asked to do something, and sometimes you either want to do it or you need to do it. But often those two things are not true. And so if I'm asked to do something and the only reason to do it is because I think somebody's going to think less of me if I don't do it, then I don't do it because, what other people think of me is none of my business. I've got to be true to myself and my people, my friends and family that I love. And, you know, so I would recommend that, saying no and feeling okay about it, right? You might have that pinch of guilt. I still do sometimes, but just say, Carrie said it's fine. So I'm just going to let it go. And then the other thing I would say is we really need to be better at, the self-care thing. This concept gets overused, I think, but I really do think it's just whatever the thing is, doing the thing for you. And so I love my girlfriends. I am so fortunate at this moment in my life to have found just incredible women that I love to spend time with. And yet I'm working, I'm, raising a kid, I'm doing this extra stuff. I'm, trying to write books and do all the things. And I started putting on my calendar 8:30 every Friday because I work from home on Fridays, like today. And oh wait, today's Thursday.
I was
See,
like,
okay, grant ourselves grace if we don't know what day it is. So I work from home on Fridays, and 8:30 in the morning on every Friday, I put coffee with friends on my calendar. And then I just invite any of the girlfriends and see who's available and try to make sure I do an hour or two just with them every week because I realized the value they hold to me, how much I care for them and how grateful I am for them, it wasn't reflected in how many hours I was spending socializing with my friends on a given week. And so I'm trying to align how I spend my time with what I actually prioritize.
Yeah. I'm always for any conversation about boundaries, which is what you were just mentioning. And I think, especially as women who are moms who are running businesses, we have even more pressure to, on our time and what we want to achieve in that limited amount that we're given every day. And so I love that. And, we also get this idea in our head that self-care has to be expensive or elaborate or, be an entire day, or just giving yourself a little thing to look forward to that is consistent and that you calendar and prioritize. I think that makes all the difference. And also, too, I mean, we have to also mention social media and the role it plays in helping us, especially when it comes to organizing, pressure ourselves to have this perfect looking house. So I really love the story that you had where the organizer's like, it doesn't look like that.
Yeah, I love that story. I think the one you're thinking of is that one where the organizer says, look, I can get you that Pinterest pantry.
Right.
I can 100% get you that.
Right.
But the people who have that pantry have a full-time staff to maintain that pantry, to
Mhm.
decant the cereal into matching containers, to do the little font on the charcoal label, on the chalkboard label, right? So
Yeah.
if that is the most important thing to you, to have your pantry look like that, we can make that
Mhm.
happen,
Right.
right? But that might not be where you want to or have the ability to commit your time and your energy, in which case, this is what a functional pantry looks like. Not
Mhm.
sexy, not pretty, not rainbow coordinated, but like, here's a pantry where you can find everything. And maybe that's a good enough pantry for us.
Mhm.
And then there are also organizers. There's a great apartment therapy blog about organizer Nona Driscoll, and
Mhm.
she's based in Long Beach, right near me. And she talks about house porn and sort of the house porn that is proliferated on social media
Yeah.
and other forms of media, and that we have set up these insane expectations for ourselves of what our homes and spaces should look like.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of organizers who are really ambivalent about before and after pictures. They
Mm.
use them on social media to market themselves,
Mhm.
but they will tell you an organized space is not necessarily a pretty space. If the
Mhm.
person can find what they need within a couple
Yeah.
minutes and they can work the way they need to work,
Mhm.
then that is a functional space that's great. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
look good. You don't have to be color coded,
Right.
right? And they'll also say we all have different clutter thresholds. I am a person who has a pretty low clutter threshold. So when my desk gets even a little bit messy, it's
Mhm.
harder for me to be productive. I can feel the sort of static in the
Mhm.
back of my head.
Yeah.
But people are very different. There are people who could
Mhm.
have a much more cluttered desk than me and work perfectly fine, which means that there's nothing wrong with their system.
Right.
It doesn't matter if I look at it and my blood pressure starts to rise,
Right.
right? That's how I feel about my son's binder. Just this morning, I told him I can't even look. I cannot look at what that binder looks like. It is giving me palpitations, but it works for him. He knows where everything is in there. And that's all
Right.
that matters. It's not about me, right?
Yeah.
So just to sort of recognize, you know, that the sort of minimal images you see on social media of the
Right.
perfectly curated bookshelf and,
Right.
that's not real life for most people.
Right.
And that's not a problem. It's not a
Right.
problem that needs to be solved.
And we also don't need to confuse, like, if your house doesn't look like that, you're a terrible spouse or you're a terrible housekeeper or a bad mom. I mean, that is not what makes you a good parent or and that's where I think the real problem lies.
Mhm.
I love looking at the pretty pictures. And some parts of my house look like that. My garage does not. And so I just have to be okay with that. And for a long time, I've let other people's comments and things,
Mm.
really affect my worthiness. And so when we allow it to creep into that, that's where we need to set that emotional boundary with ourselves and realize that
Mhm.
that's just fake news. So,
Absolutely. And that's one of the things organizers will tell me that, being organized is not what it takes to be a great organizer. They always say
Mhm.
some of the most organized people would be terrible organizers because to be an organizer means you have to spend all day in other people's messes and you have
Mhm.
to find systems that work for other people who are not organized like you are, right?
Right.
And so organizers will say again and again, the most important thing to have as an organizer is to um, be a lack of judgment,
Yeah.
to have empathy for
Yeah.
clients, and to be able to meet a client where they are
Hmm.
and embrace their priorities and their way of thinking in order to create systems that work for them. Because an organizer can come in and create the most beautiful rainbow color coded closet or shelf for you. And
Hmm.
if you can't maintain it, it's wasted money, right? It needs to be something that works for you. And
Yeah.
so the best organizers I know, they aren't necessarily the ones who leave it looking like a real simple magazine cover, but they're the ones who dig deep with the clients to figure out, okay, what's going on? What's behind this clutter?
Yeah.
And how can we figure out a way to get around whatever that barrier is, emotional, temporal? Maybe you're going through a major life change and this is just a blip. Maybe you struggle with chronic disorganization. So let's figure out systems to help you with that, right? That's the stuff organizers are really good at. And
Yeah.
that's the part that for me as an observer was the most, meaningful to witness, were just the moments of real human connection. And it's not that organizers are best friends with their clients, right?
Mhm.
But that there's a way in which being present with someone and listening to them
Mm.
and validating what they're saying while also reminding them you're a good human being, even if you got a huge 2-foot stack of mail unopened on your table, like it doesn't make you less of a good human being or person or woman or mother or spouse or employer or entrepreneur or what have you. And that was to me the most exciting part of organizing. That's where I see the potential. Like, okay, more of that is what we need to push back in an era of overwork and overwhelm.
Yeah. I mean, you shared so much goodness and so many things for us to think about. If there was any shift other than, all the things that we've talked about that you would like to see women kind of incorporate to help them manage their lives and their stuff better, what would that be?
Okay, I have like the abstract suggestion and the practical suggestion.
All
So the
right.
abstract one, thanks for letting me sneak in an extra.
Yeah.
So the abstract one is to try to recognize the story we're telling ourselves
Yeah.
about the stuff, whether it's physical stuff or whether it's too many things in our schedule or what have you, to try to recognize that's just a story that
Mhm.
we are either telling ourselves or being told by others. And it's not objectively true. Having a house full of stuff or having a really cluttered space or disorganized or you can't find your keys, which happens to me pretty much every day, even though I'm an organized person. I never know where I park my car. I can never find my keys. I don't know what it is. That's just who I am. That the story that somehow makes you flawed or less
Mm.
than, or that it's somehow a problem, that's just a story that we're telling ourselves, right? It's not an objective truth, right? So
Mhm.
there's sort of that level of it. And then on just the practical level, what I tell my girlfriends, if they ask me about like how to get my house organized, I think the tip that I found most useful was you don't organize a house at once. You don't even
Mhm.
say, okay, this weekend I'm going to organize the kitchen. That's too big. It's too much. And with organizing, it's worse before it's better. When you take that junk drawer and dump it out, like that is a panic inducing moment to see all that stuff, right? Just do one thing at a time. Just decide, I'm going to reorganize my shoes and take out any I'm not wearing. And that's it.
Mhm.
That's the task. Just do that. Or the one drawer or
Mhm.
just this one corner of the desk. Something
Mhm.
doable that is not going to, make your whole house a mess while you're in the process of it. And that's
Mhm.
going to give you that little hit of satisfaction
Mhm.
and progress that's
Mhm.
going to allow you to then choose the next bit rather than, my household is a pretty clean and organized household. And we have never, in the 15 years my husband and I have been together, we have never once had like a weekend of cleaning or a spring cleaning, right? We do a little bit as we go when we need to. And sometimes that means that I look at the game and toy cabinet maybe 50 times thinking, I got to get to that. I got to get to that. I got to get to that. And it bugs me. But eventually I get to that. And it only takes me
Mhm.
maybe an hour because it's only a small space. And then it's
Right.
done. And then I can let something else bother me about being disorganized until I get to that. Right. Like
Yeah.
just bit by manageable bit and take the story out of it. Right. Take
Yeah.
the self-flagellating, unhelpful, probably, sexist story out of your head about what it means about you.
Yeah. And everything that we talked about today is so transferable to the rest of your life. Just like you shared a little story about how you helped your son through an issue, asking him that same question. So, how we do one thing is how we do all things. And so, I just love how if you can just start looking at how you manage your stuff and life a little differently, it just has this trickle down effect. So, I love this book so much. I highly recommend it. Thank you again for writing it. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more and all the goodness?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. It just means the world to me to hear what people are thinking about the book and that it's reaching readers. And I mean, that is just, It's an author's dream
It's
to
fantastic.
have people engage with your work and
Mm,
ask the questions and have the conversation. So thank you for that. The book is available. It's on Amazon. It's published by Chicago University Press. And if you purchase the book from Chicago University Press, you can use the code PRBOXES, PRBOXES, for 30% off. So that's one option. And then if you want to know a bit more about me or you want to reach out to connect with me, which I would absolutely love, my website is Carrie M Lane. So it's CarrieMLane.com. And there's a contact sheet on there. You can just shoot me an email through that contact sheet, and I would love to hear from you, and I will absolutely reply.
love it. And I'll leave links to all that in the show notes below. I mean, thank you so much, Carrie. It's fascinating.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Angela. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.